Michel de Montaigne, 1533 to 1592, a French Renaissance philosopher. A man who fears suffering is already suffering from what he fears. You can really let that one sink in a little bit. So, de Montaigne, Renaissance era French philosopher, as I said, he invented the essay. That's why all the students love him so much. Actually, students do love him because some of the things that he contemplates and talks about in his essays have meaning. Things like the meaning of life. His most famous book, called The Essays, is his view on lots of different views. I'm not saying it's an early, Twitter account with him just espousing all of his tweets or hash browns or whatever you call them, but he just had some deep thoughts on why do I think the way I think, and what do animals think, and what is intelligence. And these essays really brought a lot of insight into him, at least, and I think others as well. So Montaigne himself, he was very wealthy, and at a young age, after being in government for a while in the parliament, he was able to retire at the age of 38. Must be a good gig. And he went and lived in this tower on his land. There's a library up there, and he wrote lots of little aphorisms and little quotes all over the walls. And for 10 years, he basically just engaged in deep thought. Wise people are foolish if they cannot adapt to foolish people. Kids tend to hate this when I say it early on because, you know what, if the kid next to you is being super annoying, you're the one who's going to have to change. Nobody likes that. It's the person's obviously wrong. They're being annoying. But here's the question. Will there always be annoying people? There's an Indian story that says there are lots of sharp rocks all over the world. You can either cover the whole world in leather, or you can just wear leather on your feet. Which one will you do? Now, obviously, it's impossible to cover the whole world in leather, but if we wear shoes and change and protect ourselves, we might be able to avoid those sharp rocks or those annoying people. This level of deep thought really gets to the question of why we react to things we react to. So Montaigne, one of the concepts that he really brings upon the reader, is that we are flawed, all of us. We don't want to be flawed, we want to be perfect. He said it's because of all of these flaws and imperfections that we are human. Now, ultimately, if somebody in an argument says, well, I'm only human, we use that to limit. In other words, we can only be so great. But when you look, there seems to be a need for perfection that's ingrained in many people. He wanted to know what it was like to live a good life and how we best can achieve that. And one of the first ways he understood was not being your own worst critic. To accept that, you know what, I have certain flaws, I have certain strengths. Self-esteem and embracing imperfection. So as we said, the acceptance of imperfection was important. Now, if I was in a classroom and I asked how many kids were kind of perfectionists or have perfectionist traits or have people close to them who want them to be perfect, all the kids will raise their hands. The pressures we face from getting the right answer in school to being the proper child, to be the right friends or somebody who's attracted to someone else, this need for perfection is very difficult. He said we need to learn to live, and learning to live is learning to live with your imperfections. If not, you will be your own worst critic. He said that we need to accept the completely ordinary in ourselves. We are not all supermodels. We are all not brilliant geniuses in the traditional sense. He said the most terrible and violent of our afflictions, in other words, things that can hurt us, is to despise or hate our own being. Until you really manifest your own self-worth and self-esteem, nothing else really matters. He says, the greatest thing in the world is to know how to belong to oneself, to be comfortable in your skin. This is something that's difficult because we look at the supermodels who've been airbrushed. You can't say they're comfortable in their skin because that's not even their skin. That's an computer-generated graphic a lot of times. People need to accept that they are what they are. As Suzuki Roshi said, you are perfect as you are. And you can use some improvement. Most people just go after the perfection. He felt there were three main areas that we suffer lots of low self-esteem. The first is shame of our bodies. Now, not everybody has this. No, wait, everybody has this. Even the prettiest and the best-looking students I've ever had have imperfections that they see. Body shame, it's a fact. All of our bodies at some point smell, ache, sag, and age. All of us. Now, maybe at some point you've got beautiful skin. At some point you will not. We all face these problems, but culture doesn't talk about it. We really don't. We only see the exemplars. We only see the best. And then the problem is, our bodies are always covered. Now, I'm not trying to come across as a nudist, but our bodies are always covered, so we become more embarrassed by them because the bodies that aren't covered are the ones, usually, that are airbrushed in the magazines. The problem isn't necessarily that bodies are different shapes. It's that people have this self-esteem area when they don't need to in many, many cases. Michel de Montaigne said, "Kings and philosophers shit, and so do ladies." That concept is quite crass, but then again, we all have certain bodily functions that are not talked about. And once again, I'm not trying to have long discourses on how everybody's body will fall apart, but it has to be something that we accept. Number 2, the feelings of being judged by others as being normal. Now, what is normal? Normal is whatever it is when we look around at the world, we want to fit in. We want to have others kind of give us that nod or the pat on the head. I don't hope people aren't going around giving you a thumbs up because you have a good wardrobe on. Well, some people do. We want to know that we are involved, that we've come together, that we're connected with those around us. The problem is most people don't fit in, or at least look at everybody wearing purple shirts that say pink, and maybe you question, do I really wish to do that? And if we don't, we often have self-esteem issues. We think that the way that we're acting is somehow wrong because we're not normal going with the rest of the sheep. What is perfect or normal anyways? I think... I had a kid one time said, I have to let my freak flag fly, which I kind of respected. You got to let you be you and engage in it. Go, 10 toes in, not holding back. Feelings of being judged as normal. Now, De Montaigne, I usually pause while kids watch the kids dance, but I'll talk at the same time. Montaigne said, really when you look at what is normal, it's only specific to your culture, it's not specific to reason. Meaning, if I engage in a discussion in class of the favorite meat of the kids eat, if I say, well, who likes, who in here likes chicken? Who likes cow? How about horse? Kids are, horse, no way. Dog, no way. Well, if you were in India, it would be cows, no way. These normalities, if you will, are really not universal. If you read, if you travel, if you go somewhere else, what you think is weird might be commonplace. Having a lot of foreign exchange students in my class over the years, it's interesting to note that they look at things that we every day look at as normal as being weird. I had one student who thought it was quite weird to shake hands. Well, now in a post-COVID world, it is weird to shake hands. But to him, he said, well, it's kind of like saying, here, have my germs. Instead, when we're happy, we slap our hands together like seals. That's normal. Everyone rushes elsewhere and into the future because no one wants to face our own inner self. Well, most of us can't sit up in the castle for 10 years, and most people wouldn't want to, but if you wanted to, or let's say you were locked in a lockdown during COVID-19, if you had to really face a lot of your thoughts and your emotions, maybe you realize a lot of the walls that block you in are walls that are self-created. But most people don't want to do that. They don't want to actually sit down and engage in dismantling those walls. Number 3, intellectual inadequacy caused by comparing ourselves to others. So many kids in the past, when we get to topics like politics or the economics, kids will literally pull themselves out of a conversation. They don't want to have that conversation because they think they're somehow dumb. Now, there are levels of having an awareness of like what's going on in the world before you engage in political talk, but truly, anybody who has a view on almost everything, it's an opinion. Montaigne said that education can be really intimidating. You're sitting in a classroom and one kid in the front is raising his hand all the time and getting all the right answers. And you can kind of sit back and go, well, I don't want to get called on. I'm not as smart as him. But if you really look at school, school is getting you to try to memorize what other people think. We don't actually try to engage you to realize what you think. What you think might have a lot of value. As De Montaigne says, we are richer than we think, each one of us. I've got some of the brightest kids I've ever had are kids who do not do well on tests or in school. It's not because they're dumb, it's because they're wicked creative. But that's not something that memorization, which the American school system is based upon, has any credit to. Wisdom is better than knowledge. Most people who fill their minds up with their arrogant intellectual knowledge, who try to come off as so smart, they're full of all of these facts, but will these facts lead to a happier life? Learned may we be with another man's learning, we can only be wise with wisdom of our own. Continuing into the intellectual inadequacy, a everyday, common, hardworking person who realizes the limitations or the imperfections of their mind and body will probably be able to live a better life. Some of the people who I know who are very rich, they're miserable because they think somehow the next dollar is going to give them the peace of mind that the first million have not. That's foolishness. To learn that we have said or done a foolish thing, that is nothing. We must learn that we are nothing but fools, a far broader and more important lesson. I think everybody, when they get in an argument, even when they know they're wrong, they try to protect their viewpoint, not because they necessarily think they're right, but they don't want to accept that they're wrong. Here's a little a secret. We're all morons. None of us really know what we're talking about most of the time. Nothing is clearer than watching everybody discuss in this current climate. But when you accept that you might make a mistake, then you might be willing to make a mistake and take a chance. Hugging the tree of life, you have to go out on a limb sometimes. Cultural superiority and relativism. This usually gets a rise from the class. Montaigne was really bothered by the Europeans, and for our purpose you can think of America, the belief that we are somehow superior to the natives, as he described. Natives being people in other countries. That we are better than them. In America, it has a name called American exceptionalism. The idea of the natives in the traditional sense, he was talking about natives from Brazil. Now, Montaigne said, you know what? Those people in Brazil can do a lot of things better than us. Now, maybe they're not better us than at wearing shirts, but they probably are better than us at, hunting for food. And it's completely natural for people to be different. Different doesn't mean superior. Each man calls a barbarian whatever is not his own practice. For we have no other criterion of reason than the example and idea of the opinions and customs we live in. Meaning, if you remember Plato's cave, all you know is what you've been taught. If you've been taught that throwing a ball at a hole from different distances, and we're going to call it basketball, is fun, that's great. Or maybe you live in Scotland and you want to throw a caber toss, which is where they throw the big telephone pole and get hernias. That could be your choice as well. These are things that we're taught culturally. And Montaigne is saying, what we are not used to, we think is wrong or barbarism. That's not necessarily true. Montaigne thought that the Europeans could actually maybe learn something if they didn't always think that their way was the best way. Maybe we can learn from other cultures. Montaigne said, look at the Brazilians. Now, they are not bothered by any unpleasant emotions or thoughts or occupations. Their life is going to be completely different than ours. I mean, the third world problems versus the first world problems, not having Wi-Fi or them not having something in stock at the store is a completely different level of problem that is going to be had. He said that maybe, unlike Europeans, who were always caught up in their religious fighting. Now, we don't have religious fighting as strong. We have lots of political fighting. The Brazilians spend their time in admirable simplicity and ignorance, without law, without king, and without religion of any kind. You could clearly make an argument that we need laws and we need kings, but I also see a lot of ignorance in people who are educated, and I see a lot of people making everyday lives a lot more complex than they need to. The simplicity of life, I think, most people would admire. Only the fools are certain and assured. Generally speaking, the quote is, I believe it was from Lincoln, those who know do not speak, and those that speak do not know. View of animals. Montaigne looked at how we viewed animals. He thought most people thought we're superior to animals. He thought maybe that's slightly arrogant. How do we know that the animal is less intelligent than us? We refer to them as beasts. Now, I don't necessarily do that, but in the time that was something that was said. And Montaigne said, when you really look at the fighting we do amongst us, is it fair to say that we're any less primal or beast-like than the quote-unquote beasts who we're superior to? The argument always ensues as whether or not we are superior to animals because we are top of the food chain and therefore we have opposable thumbs and intelligence to make things that can blow others up, and therefore we can kill the rhino, which makes us better than them. I'm not saying better in terms of who can kill what. I'm saying the superiority of the species of man versus animal is something that man tends to hold as an intellectual thought. When I play with my cat, who knows whether I do not make her more sport than she makes me? Now, I don't want to annoy everybody, but you are smarter than your dogs. But in terms of cats, maybe they're looking at us with the thought, you know what, I can't wait till they go to sleep at night, or I wish my paws were a little bit bigger. Who knows what the other animals are thinking? And everybody's very quick to tell me that other animals don't think because their time as a parrot, they remember not being able to think. Montaigne said, you know what, some animals are superior to us. Now, obviously we know in terms of bats have sense of hearing, other animals have sense of smell. I played the video of the California earthquake where the camera shows the dog getting up and running horridly out of the room, probably about 9 seconds before all the other doofus humans sitting at their desks realize that the earthquake is happening. He basically says some animals, you know what, are there only 5 senses? Now, I would generally argue that there's more than 5 senses. If you ever are actually passing, don't do this while you're driving, but if you pass somebody or somebody passes you on the highway, just stare at them as they pass you. They will know you are looking at them, and they will look back at you. Then obviously quickly avert your gaze. But we do have other senses other than the 5 main ones. We have a sense we know when somebody's looking at us. I don't know what that's called. It probably has a name. But how do we know animals don't have senses that we have no idea? Montaigne tried to show that, you know what, maybe we should be a little more humble. On solitude, the final big concept. Now, solitude is being alone. And most people don't like to be alone. That's a fear most people have. But he actually embraced solitude. He said in his famous essay on solitude, he tried to look at our need, our desire for mass approval. And why do we need everybody and everything to be liking of us? He said it has to do with this pursuit of fame that's not conducive to long-term peace of mind. He said if you're always looking for that pat on the head, for that approval, for that admiration, you are giving other people the power to influence you. Gandhi said never let people with dirty feet walk through your soul. Maybe we shouldn't give the keys to our happiness and leave them in somebody else's pocket. I turn my gaze inward. I fix it there and keep it busy. I look inside myself. I continually observe myself. Most people don't do this. Most people sleepwalk through their lives, quickly move from thing to thing, from app to app, from commute to job to sleep. And ultimately, we don't like to have those free time because we can't face a lot of these inner thoughts. Montaigne believed if you can kind of actually examine how you think, you'll find flaws in how you think, and then you can improve those flaws. Just like Socrates spoke about the unexamined life not being worth living. I do not care so much what I am to others as I care what I am to myself. I'm not taking this in the narcissistic, egotistical way in terms of only what I think matters, but giving yourself the freedom to feel how you want to feel about yourself is an important, eye-opening moment for most. Montaigne said, "We always strive to be the best, to have fame. That's why we don't have peace of mind. We care too much about the opinions of others." Montaigne said it's pretty basic. Just do what's right because it's right, not because it's accepted by others, and you'll be fine. But instead, we tend to let others be the arbiters and the deciders about how we feel about ourselves. Finally, Amor Fati, giving up control. This is a concept that we talked about earlier in the year, we'll talk about later in the year. Amor Fati, if you remember, is the acceptance cheerfully of what happens, of loving Amor Fati, your fate. Well, that's really tough. If you've had a crappy life experience, there's no way you love that that happens. But Amor Fati is the concept that, yes, you need to love that that happened. You need to realize that that event, that negative, terrible event or series of events, shaped you. It shaped you in ways that nothing else could have. And maybe part of you died when that terrible event happened, but that part of you that died was the part of you that could not rise up over that event. And now the part of you that's left is moving on. Amor Fati is using those negative things in your life as rocket fuel instead of as a backpack. Amor Fati, as he said, is the concept that one wants nothing to be different, not in the future, not in the past, not for all eternity. It's willing to accept that the past did what the past did, and now you can only handle what's going on in this very moment. The beautiful souls are they that are universal, open, and ready for all things. This was a student this year who wrote this. I'll just read it. "The mind that perceives the limitation is the limitation." That's a quote by Buddha that I stumbled upon while looking through the notes to make these journals up. This kid was a great student, but a little slacking on journals. I enjoy this quote in particular because I feel as if it relates to my sometimes negative way of thinking about the things going on in my life. Oftentimes, I find myself highlighting what I did wrong more than what I did right. This is because I seek to have everything go perfect, and when it does not, I relish in the sorrow that it did not. I have put a lot of doubt on myself over the years, and I know it's not healthy. However, it's hard to break old habits. I used to believe that other factors were limiting me to not living up to my true potential, but now I'm starting to wake up and realize I have been the one creating my torture for many years. This is a result of this student actually engaging in a little bit of solitude, engaging in a little bit of deep thought, and realizing a lot of times the very walls that lock us in are the walls that we've created. And to wrap it up, the most certain sign of wisdom is cheerfulness. Now, a lot of people will argue it's impossible just to be happy. You can't just be cheerful. It depends what happens. Well, maybe not. This video is a brief snippet from an Indian mystic teacher named Sadhguru. He's the most famous teacher currently in India, which kind of illustrates this concept.